meeting for April 2025. Going forward, we do plan to, at the request of one of our subgrantees at a monitoring visit, we are going to try to send these agenda items a little bit beforehand. We were not able to for this particular meeting, but going forward, we do plan to. For today's agenda items, we're going to go over some federal and software updates, a draft review for our operations manual. We do have some new SWS variances, some review of steps to credential contractors, amendment updates, elevated ACPU concerns, and then our normal spending production updates, the next meeting timeframe, and WDR program updates. And this portion is the start of our Weatherization Assistance Program section of this PowerPoint. So for the federal and software updates, for LIHEAP 24, funds run through the end of September. We have these funds through then, but beyond that, we do not have any additional information for the future funds. We have reached out to DSS, but they do not have any additional information that could be provided to us. So this is information we know at this time. For DOE, we were notified that of some weatherization team staffing updates on their end. On the federal level, we were told that from the management supervisory team that Amy Klesmeyer, Carrie Smith, and Detrick Clark have opted into the deferred resignation program, and that their last day will be this Friday. So Derek Schrader and Ray Judy will continue to lead the DOE WAC team. Ray Judy will be on the technical side more, and Derek on the programmatic. For the remaining staff that will be departing, we were told that we would hear from DOE soon on updates with new points of contacts and any adjustments and program assignments. We did have a monthly meeting with DOE this Monday, and we were told that our programmatic project officer's last day is this Friday as well. That for those that have met him, that was Sasha. And then for our technical project officer, that will be our main point of contact, at least for now, and that's Tommy. For Hancock, they were acquired by Banyan. But we've been told that there's no impact or change for the network. So these are some of our federal or software updates that we wanted to pass along for the information that we have available to share with you at this time. And then in terms of our operations manual, I know a few months back we've mentioned that we were working on updating our manual to include some new funding sources that were not in the current version. Our plan is to have that sent out to the network this Friday, April 25th, and it's draft state. And then we're going to give a month time for the network to come in and review, similar to the WDR manual process. And then going forward, we would plan to have this done every November, and we would annually be doing this. And also, we would like to have this released at the same time as the red lines from DOE. So that is our goal going forward. But as of right now, we plan to have our drafts sent out in April, this Friday, and then give you that month to review. And the earlier you can give us comments, the better. But that's our current plan for the manual release. And then David's going to go over some of the new SWS variances.
Yeah, so over the last several years, you've heard us talk about variance requests, and that anybody, if there is something that you cannot install per the SWS, or if there's new items or tools out there that are available that are not in compliance with the SWS, and we do have the ability to submit a variance request. Actually, Project Homes brought one to our attention last week, and we got it approved within a matter of like 72 hours. It was a very quick turnaround on DOE's part and our part, and some of that was because, well, most of that was because Project Homes did their homework. They brought us the full definition or description of what was going on. They supplied us with the actual materials and stuff we needed to seek the variance. Um, we got a few more slides here, but basically, the SWS, the reference number there is 6.01012C and then 01013C. They require the intake for your ASHRAE appliances and your exhaust terminations to be at least 10 foot apart in separation. If we go to the next slide, in that case, so Whisper Green, Whisper Vent came out with this new termination that allowed for the intake and exhaust to go through the same penetration on the building's shell. According to the SWS, we could not use this without an approved variance. Those terminations would not be 10 foot apart. The manufacturer did design these with ERV specifically in mind. So that way they'll go through one penetration and they're set up so that the streams are not cross-contaminating one another. So this is one of the examples that Project Homes brought to our attention. We could not use this according to the SWS because it wasn't in compliance. The next slide will actually show the new language or the approved variance that we have, and it's just basically just says it added a line in there saying unless manufacturer specification indicates the exhaust termination is designed for these locations, or the same thing with like the intake side of the ASHRAE component. That just allows, like, if there are other manufacturers out there, we didn't pigeonhole it to one wall cap. We open it up as like, as long as the manufacturer specs state that there's no cross contamination, that they're approved for these locations within to go out the same termination, that we're at the same penetration, we're fine. Keep in mind, this does not supersede building codes or anything like that. So if there are building codes in your locality or jurisdiction you're working that prohibits, these from being close to one another, or if there's other exhaust terminations such as dryer vents and so forth that's other in close proximity, this does not supersede those. This just gives you those allowances in those situations where it is feasible to install. We currently have 5 approved variances in the Commonwealth of Virginia. The next slide will kind of give you a brief overview of these. We will be releasing, we're going to send out copies of the approved variances. It's a spreadsheet that we get approved through DOE. And the really quick highlight is the R value of attic hatch. We're allowed to reduce those to a level that allows you to open the attic access freely, so you can gain access in there. Especially if the attic access happens to be in the eave of the house or in a tight location, sometimes those thick foam lids or those really thick bats of insulation really get in the way of getting that hatch open. SWS for pipe insulation also states that the mechanical or the pipe wrap, that the one that comes from the factory, is not sufficient. You have to put tape on it or use some type of other adhesive. There are some other pipe insulations out there that has the double seal adhesive on it. We did get a variance from DOE to allow those type of that type of pipe insulation to be used, so you don't have to worry about adding the additional layer of tape on top of it. The heat pump sizing chart on many of us use this the manual J sizing for mobile homes. It's only allowed for mobile homes, and you have to follow the Energy Star reference based on the zone and the area that you live in. And then the next two are for the ASHRAE, the one we just talked about. Where there's 2 different sections that talk about it, and one's the air intake and one's the exhaust termination. So we had to get 2 variances there, so that way we're in compliance with both the intake and the exhaust. So that's just a real quick highlight of the 5 approved variances in the that we have standing for the SWS at this moment. Like I said, we will send out the spreadsheet that kind of gives you the exact language on all 5 of those variances. Next slide. All right, steps to credential new contractors. We've been getting a lot of questions about how and what's needed for getting new contractors to come on board. We did release an information notice last year, information notice 2-24. It goes over the technical requirements. Really quick, high level though, for new contractors coming in for like specific trades, not necessarily turnkey contractors that do the weatherization along with electrical, HVAC, and gas fitting and so forth. But these are just for like those one-off or those specialty contractors such as the roofing contractor or the electrical contractor, HVAC contractor. They have to be registered in the Commonwealth of Virginia to work in Virginia to be as a contractor here. They have to have the D4 license for the respective trade. And then we also require them to have an OSHA 10 certification for all of their crew members and techs that are possible to be on a weatherization job site. Um, all of these trainings, all of their certifications must be registered through the training center on the training tracker. And then once it's there, we have to be notified. We DHCD need to be notified so that we can add them as a new vendor in Hancock so that you can select them. We will not add them to our system or to Hancock until their credentials have been updated on the training tracker. That's just a real quick highlight of that. But we wanted to make sure that everybody was informed and knew that they could reference our information notice 2-24.
Okay, and then for amendment updates, as a reminder, the DOE and WRF, which is the Weatherization Readiness Funds for program year 22 and 23 amendments have been sent out and they run through the end of this month. The older program years need to be closed out. DHCD is not going to be allowing for these extended extensions going forward, like we have this grant cycle. For invoices, they need to be submitted before the amendment runs out. And unless you've taken on additional funds and have had communication with DHCD for any reason additional time is needed. The time for administratively of getting these put into place, updated within the systems tracked and put into Hancock takes a lot away of the time we could be reviewing invoices or working on other things for you. So just being really timely with your invoices is helpful on our end, so we do not hold you up anymore either for requesting those payments. And then for the IJR, the bill amendments, we do anticipate to send those out to the network this week. And then they would be uploaded into CAMS and you'd be notified via email. And then for our normal WAP update for the ACPU levels, the health and safety percentages, the spending balances, and the production count, I'm going to go into those. But first, I did want to discuss some elevated ACPU concerns that we have. It is really critical to keep our DOE ACPU levels down this final quarter. We're ending our grant cycle for that 3-year grant cycle. And currently we are elevated. If when we close the grant cycle out, if we have an elevated average cost per unit in the system that we have this information uploaded in, which is Page, then we will owe money back to DOE and it will be those subgrantees that have elevated ACPU levels. We have started sending invoices back for the DOE annual formula funds if those ACPU levels are elevated because of where we are as a network. In the past, we've been able to bring it down. We've had some of the subgrantees that had their ACPU so low that it helped those that had elevated amounts that our overall network amount would not be an issue. But we are at a point right now that if we were to be closing out right now, we would have money going back. And we don't want anyone in the network to have to owe money back to DOE because we have elevated ACPU levels. Carryover for funds also will impact the quarters and the way they're reported to DOE. So any of the older 22 or 23 funds that are getting submitted this year, the way they're reported in Page, they also will be impacting how it looks for this program year 24 submission for the closeout. To give you an idea of where we are as a network on the ACPU levels and what's the allowable amount for each of those funding sources, those that are highlighted in red, you can see are where we are currently elevated. And those that are not marked in red, they're within an allowable range. LIHEAP, we do have some ability to go over our ACPU level. We don't want to go too far above, but because it impacts our production that results with the funds that we're receiving, but we do have that as an exception in our LIHEAP state plan. For the IJR, what we've formerly referred to as bill, we do have a little bit more time to work down bringing those ACPU levels, since it's an average of the full grant cycle, but it is something we need to be keeping an eye on, and it has been brought to our attention that we need to keep a close eye on, and DOE closely monitors this. But at the immediate time, the DOE 24 ACPU is the most concerning. For our network health and safety percentages, there's a cap across the funding sources at 15%. We do have another exception with LIHEAP where we can go over that 15%. And then if we were to want to request a higher percentage with the Department of Energy, we have to have backup to be able to show that it's needed. So that's also where that exception can be helpful with LIHEAP. Those that are marked in red, you can see we have some flexibility to be spending more health and safety there than we currently are. For DOE 23, we're pretty close to that 15% mark. So that's really kind of where we would want to be. For most years when we've closed out, it's about 9 to 10%. And for the health and safety percentages, it's going to be based off of your program operations amount. So anytime there's a budget adjustment or changes to either of those budget categories, it's going to impact the percentage. For our DOE 22, we are working on closing that out. But as you can see, the ACPU level right now is currently well below. For our Readiness 22 funds, we still do have a balance there. We are working on bringing that down, and we did have some of those funds reallocated and awarded out to agencies that could take on additional funds. And our ACPU level currently still right now is at a good amount. We did have that increase to where it could be at the 15%, 15,000. For our DOE 23 annual funds, we're close to closing those out as well. Right now, we're still within the allowable ACPU limit, although we could easily have that go over. We are close to closing that out, which is good. And then for our WRF 23 funds, we still have quite a bit of funds that need to be spent. We do have some invoices that have been submitted, and they're either under technical review or had some corrections that needed to be made. So there have been some funds that have been spent that are not reflected on here. But we do have almost 76,000 available for the network. So if there were to be anyone that needs additional WRF funds, we do have them readily able to go out with a budget increase form. But as of right now, based off the way that we look at the funds, we're only going to consider the funds spent once they've been invoiced. We can be told that they're obligated, but until those invoices are submitted, we really can't say that they're going to be spent or that they're correctly spent. So as of right now, we still have about 414,000 unspent. And then for the DOE 24 annual funds, we still have a ways to go to spend our funds. We are in this last quarter. So it is critical to make sure that you're spending out these funds, that you're making sure the production's there to lower your ACPU levels. Again, you can see that overall as a network, we are elevated and we would be owing money back now if this is when the quarter was ending. So in these last couple of months, really just making sure you have that production there, or seeing if there are expenses that are not direct job costs that could be charged elsewhere. Just really evaluating that. Um, and then for our 24 readiness funds or WRF funds, we still have quite a bit of funds remaining. So as of right now, we have quite a bit of funds going back to DOE. We really want to minimize the amount of funds that we send back to the federal government. Since I've been here, we have never returned funds, and we never really want to. So if you have questions with spending them, please let us know. We were told and when we spoke on Monday with DOE that the readiness has to be invoiced and complete it by the end of this grant cycle. So that would be the June 6th final invoice date. If it results in an IJA completion rather than a DOE annual formula fund completion, then you have some additional time. It doesn't have to be the IJA weatherization portion doesn't have to be by June 6th. You could go a month or so after. It needs to be within a reasonable time frame, which is not really specified out. But really when we report and close out the grant, we need to show that it was completed with either DOE or IJA. And then yes, Leroy?
So this readiness fund for 24, if we anticipate that we can't spend it before or remit before June the 6th, we just let you know in advance?
That you will not?
Right.
Yes, right now it looks like we're going to be returning funds to the Department of Energy. The earlier we have that amount, it's probably better so we can give them an idea of what's coming back. And if anyone were able to pick up additional funds, the earlier we know, the easier it is on our end to go through those budget reductions. So you would want to submit a budget reduction form.
That'd
And
be
if you
fine.
need one of those forms, just let me know. But that helps us on our end with closing out in a more efficient manner too.
Okay.
Us finding out when we're reviewing the final invoices after they were already due, that puts us in a difficult spot, and it just makes us work less efficiently than we could be to close out or to have things reflected as they really are. So the earlier you know, the better. But we really do push for you to use those funds. Some of the easiest ones to go through would be a roof. There are other allowable measures, and Hancock will show that what the measures are, and we can also provide that guidance again if anyone needs it. But a roof's really going to be the simplest to get approved and to have it go through. And Tim, it looks like you wanted to say something as well.
Yeah, just a reminder, if you reduce WRF funds, please don't be surprised if there's an associated admin reduction, because you do receive admin on the full DOE funding, not only for operations, but also for WRF. If you invoice separately for WRF, you don't invoice for the admin at that time, but you do receive admin. It's calculated on the full base of DOE and WRF. So I think John had a question in the chat, Michelle.
You say,
Are you speaking of me, Tim?
Yes.
Oh, no, I don't have a question.
Okay.
it looks like Leroy might. Leroy, so for the bill or IJA, it's still going to say Bill 22 in Hancock. Right now, since those amendments have run out, we're trying to get those out to you as quickly as possible. We anticipate them to be coming back this week, but if the latest next week. Once we've sent those amendments to you, they've been sent back with the authorized signer from your agency and CAMS, then we will adjust the end date in Hancock, and then you'll have access to those funds.
So you understand that, as my understanding is that's what's holding us up from invoicing is because we can't choose the BIL 22 for funding. And
Yes.
okay, all right,
You
that's
can
good. Thank you.
you can invoice. No other funding source would be limited right now. I think there's one agency that we're waiting for an amendment from for the 22 and 23 funds. So they don't have access to those funds in the system. But all of the other amendments we would have had back for older program years for the IJR bill amendments. There were some changes that were made to them, and we're getting those out as quickly as we can. Right now, we're in the last signature phase.
Okay, thank you.
And then for LIHEAP, again, you can see that we have the elevated ACPU, but we do have some of that flexibility to go over. And for the ACPU for LIHEAP, as it would have been stated on in the earlier slide, it is calculated a little bit differently than the Department of Energy funds. For LIHEAP, the HHS or DSS, they see the funds as either benefit or admin. So all of the budget categories except for the admin would be considered a benefit cost. So for the ACPU, it would be the benefit cost divided by the total number of jobs. And for our IJA, this would be the breakdown of where we are right now and how our ACPU level is looking, which is elevated. But again, we do have a little bit of time to work on bringing that down, but we do need to start doing that sooner than later, just because it'll be harder as time goes on. For an update, Stephen?
Yeah, you said we had a little bit of time, so are we trying on this bill or IJA, are we trying to get that down before we get the second half of the money? Because we've got, a lot of us ramped up, so naturally ours is going to be higher, and the further along we go, it's going to come down further.
Mm-hmm. So from the benchmarks that they outlined, I don't recall in the blue, you'll see some of the benchmarks that DOE outlined for us to meet to receive that final 50% of the allocation. From my recollection, the ACPU is not one of those, but it is something that they're looking at. And each quarter that we're elevated, when we're reporting it to DOE, we do get questioned about it. And it has been, there was an Inspector General report months back with states with elevated ACPUs as of last December or the December before, and we were one of those states in that report. So it is something on the federal level that they're keeping an eye on. So we do need to work on bringing that down. But I don't believe it's one of the benchmarks. It could be something that they bring up, but I don't recall it being one of the benchmarks to receive those additional funds. And in terms of where we are for meeting those benchmarks, the benchmark that the subgrantees really have an impact on it would be for the production. And for our overall production amount for IJA that's planned, it would be 4,808 units. The benchmark that was set is you have to be at 30% of that goal, which would be 1,442. And right now, for the approved invoices through last Friday, we are at 969 units. So of the whole 4,808 units, we're at 20%. But if you were taking a look of where we are at 969 units to meet that 30% goal. We're 67% of the way there. So we are getting closer. And that is one of the reasons that we've made some of the adjustments that we discussed last month. And we discussed individually with sub-grantees. One is so that we can meet those benchmarks so that we can get that second release of funds. We need to bring our ACP levels down, and we need to have that production increased and the funds being spent. And for our annual DOE monitoring, monitoring is one of those benchmarks, but without having the invoices submitted and submitted in a timely basis, it impacts us to be able to us at DHCD to be able to meet that benchmark. And currently there are 2 sub-grantees that do not meet the minimum number of DOE homes to monitor. And we need weatherized and invoice homes by June to be able to monitor those in time. And for our next monthly meeting, it's going to be Wednesday, May 21st at 9 a.m. The invite has not gone out, but I anticipate sending it out today. If you do not receive it today, just let me know and I can either forward or resend it. And then Aaron?
Michelle, real quick, there is a question in the chat from Mark.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know, Tim, if you want to answer Mark's question.
Mark asks, what changes do we anticipate in the loss of so many DOE staff? And, again, I'm not sure that we're in a great position to answer that right now. These are designed as block grants. Historically, when block grants were kind of first introduced, and in large part, back in the 80s, it was really just making the agencies more of a pass-through. So, maybe we'll be seeing just a lot more latitude given to the states if it's a return to that format. But at this point, it's unclear. I know we have seen a lot more WPNs come through prior to the change of the administration than the rate than the short time that I've been in here and over the past year and a half. And I think others would say that the rate of WPNs coming through programmatic notices was fairly high in the previous administration. So I do anticipate maybe more sort of stasis in the direction of the program at the very least. But for right now, what we're doing and what we can control and what we're trying to do is still whatever we can to capture the second half of that IJA funding, and proceeding as if all the funding is going to be there next year. And it's the best way we can ensure to show that the program performs for us to get the kind of support at the congressional level that we want. So I don't know. Any other questions on that? Okay.
Michelle,
Yes.
do we know why the ACPU is elevated and throughout the state?
I mean, there can be various reasons. The average cost per unit is calculated on the DOE or the Department of Energy funds. It's going to be calculated by the overall program operations amount divided by the total number of jobs. The cost of the materials could increase the ACPU. The cost of overhead expenses that are charged for the direct work on the program, that could be increasing it. It's hard to say without speaking with every single agency of what's causing their individual increase to that ACPU level, but on a national level, it is something that we've been made aware that ACPU levels are getting closer and harder to manage at times. And that is one of the reasons that DOE, from what availability that they could do to make changes, would be those additional budget categories for program year 25, which would be the audits, the QCI and the intake and eligibility, which we did add into as optional budget categories for our state plan. Those can give some relief where they typically would have been program operations expenses. So hopefully to bring down your ACPU level some, that's the ability that they had that could impact it. But really it's going to be on an individual basis, evaluating where you are, what's causing that cost to go up. And it's not going to be just your direct job cost. It's going to be all of the agency expenses that are charged to program operations. So I would recommend making sure that your programmatic and your financial staff and leadership are talking and evaluating it together, because without knowing what all of those expenses are, it is going to be harder to know where you're going to fall if you don't know those upcoming monthly expenses. So I hope that helps answer.
Yeah, can you repeat that other part again about the working together part where you started out something?
I'm just saying the financial side, your programmatic side, and your leadership, you do want to make sure you're communicating together, that you're evaluating what those expenses are. Because if, say, on the programmatic side, you don't know other expenses that are getting charged to program operations, they're going to impact your ACPU level. So just as an agency, you should be looking at those expenses and knowing what's coming up to know where your production needs to be, or how to evaluate that ACPU level. And Tim, it looked like you had a comment you wanted to make.
Well, not on that, just something related, but something else. So I don't know. Any other questions on the ACPU for Michelle? Yeah, I just want to say our annual plan is due May 5th, and our team has been working really hard to get this done and get this in early. And we there's an April group or batch of states, then there's a July batch of states, and we're in the July, and then there's sort of an October batch of states. They're aligned with the federal fiscal year. It's really in our interest to get it in early, and I just want to let the network know that thanks for all the input that you provided, your participation in this process, and just recognize that the team here, Michelle, Jen, and Jen being the lead on the plan, and everyone who contributed throughout the entire network for pulling together the plan, and we should be ahead of schedule submitting that on Friday. So.
And Jen's had a lot to coordinate together to make sure that we could get that done early rather than submitting right on time. Because the earlier we can get it submitted, hopefully the earlier we would be in that queue to be reviewed. So thank you, Jen. And if we don't have any more questions right now, then Aaron, you can go in your WDR section, and we can also stay on for some additional questions as well.
Good morning. My name is Aaron Shoemaker, and I'm the Housing Program Administrator at DHCD for the Weatherization Deferral Repair Program, or WDR for short. Of course, next several slides, I'll provide an update on the WDR funding and data on WDR expenditures and remittances. Next slide, please. Reminder number one, the 22, 23, and 24 grant agreements expire June 30th, 2025. All these agreements have been previously extended, and we will be recapturing funds that have not been invoiced in CAMS by June 6, 2025. Reminder number two, the 6-month update of the WDR program manual, we call it the February 2025 update, sent out to the network February 28, 2025, and we went into the effect following Monday. We also released an updated WDR application form with a page 2 that has the preliminary funding worksheet. So please ensure that all your new WDR initial setup reports have this document. We've been getting some that have some outdated documentation. If you have some applications that have already been signed prior to this going into effect, then just let us know and we'll work with you on those clients. And reminded 2.5, please, the purpose of that preliminary funding worksheet is to please review your deferred clients for WRF eligibility and other funds and prioritize spending those funds before WDR, or at least braiding them with WDR, since WDR is going to run out. And as Michelle pointed out, we don't want to return WRF to the federal government, and we do not return WDR to a federal government or an auction or anything like that. So then also for the remittances, please make sure that you're using that updated WDR cover sheet, as well as the updated WDR certification of completion checklist. And all of these documents are available on the WDR page of the DHCD website. Please, next slide. All right, so the next 5 slides, including this one, are the usual 5 slides that contain the detailed data regarding expenditures by program year of the WDR grant agreements based on submitted WDR remittances and CAMs. And as usual, I'm not going to go over them in gratuitous detail during the presentation, but you're welcome to explore the data in more detail. We will send out the slides after the presentation, and we typically email the slides out to the network within the same week of the presentation. So if you're on the email list, you will get these slides. So this first slide has the 15 subgrantees that completed WDR jobs for that first program agreement. Originally, there were 17 grant agreements, but 2 subgrantees didn't spend funds and discontinued being WAP WDR providers. And the one that's highlighted in darker gray, Telemon, also it's no longer WAP provider. So we have the 14. And of those, 3 subgrantees are still spending these funds for this program year. And again, this grant expires June 30th and needs to be invoiced by June 6th in CAMS remittances. Slide next, please. This slide has the expenditures for the 23 grant agreements, and this is all 14 of the current subgrantees that all also received grant agreements for this program year. And similarly, 3 subgrantees have remaining funds for this year. And these also need to be invoiced in CAMS by June 6th. If that's not going to be the case, we've already been in touch with everybody, so don't panic. We've already talked about this, but if you have any questions, of course, reach out. Please slide next. So in this slide has the expenditures for the 24 grant agreements for three subgrantees still spending these funds. And on this slide and the previous slide, there's blanks next to some subgrantees. Just as a reminder, those are subgrantees who originally received these grant agreements, but because DHCD doesn't allow people to hold more than 2 grant agreements at the same time for the same program, we recaptured funds that hadn't been touched and put them in the final grant agreement, which is the 2-year one that's on the next slide. Slide, please, next. So this slide contains the expenditures for that aforementioned 2-year grant agreement, 2025-2026 is how it's listed in CAMS. These grant agreements contain the remaining WDR funds. 4 grantees have spent funds from this grant. Yeah, double check, make sure I updated that. There's currently, let's see, what does it say? $16.59 million remaining. And these expire June 30, 2026. And next, please, slide. And this slide contains data based on the submitted remittances for WDR with, as of this month, we're actually last month, we served over 2,000 homes, now at 2,057. and excellent work. Over 1,100 single-family homes and 865 multifamily units. The average remittance for single-family homes has increased to over 2,100. Actually, it looks like it's 22.8 now, 22.9. And so that's something that we expected with the program. And then the bottom chart shows the repair types associated with the remittances for these jobs. Most jobs have multiple repair types. Over 60% of jobs have HVAC repairs, and over 50% have roof repairs. And about 1/4 jobs have repairs that fall into the other category. Very interesting. This concludes the WDO program update. Thank you for listening. I will be in touch with subgrantees who have questions regarding the expiration of their 22, 23, and 24 grant agreements and reallocation of those funds. Thank you.
Let you know, hot off the press, we just received an email from our DOE project or program officer that he has rescinded his deferred resignation notice and will continue as our program officer. So that's good. I mean, I think he's been a productive partner for us, and I think that's going to be helpful, especially as we close out this grant and try to work through the next cycle. So.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? We have had a request during a monitoring visit to also, sometimes since we run up right to the hour, to stay on some additional time. So for future meetings, you may see an additional 15 minutes added to the end. We still anticipate that first hour is really when we will be going through the information, but just to kind of hold on our calendars some time for additional questions if needed. Hi, Stephen. Did you have a question?
Yeah, just trying to see if I heard this right or understood it right. But so as far as the bill monitoring, there's a couple agencies that maybe hasn't done enough production, so nobody can be monitored as of now.
So it would be Bill and DOE that they're monitoring, and we need to be making sure that we're meeting the benchmarks for all of those, from my understanding. And there are
I think the
some
biggest
agencies.
takeaway, Stephen, was that it's difficult for us because the technical monitors, we have to come in and we have to monitor either 5 or 10%, and we have a trend of folks holding off invoices until late in the year. Or later in the quarter. We still have two that have not even, we have one that hadn't submitted any, and then one that hasn't even did, but just a handful. But it's really hard for us to get a number on how many we need to monitor, what our targets are when they're not regularly invoiced. And it, like, there's a lot of them that we can go out and monitor and we can get a good idea from. But we can come in a snapshot in time. Let's say that we come in and monitor an agency in January. And we can look at historical data and say, hey, we only need to visit 3 jobs. But let's say that there's a really good run of production and that subgrantee does really well. They submit a ton of jobs. Well, they submit those more jobs than what we anticipated. And now we have to go back and grab additional jobs because now we fell below our benchmark of 5 or 10%. So when everything's closer to the end of the year, it's really difficult for us to make those quick adjustments.
I understand. And so when you're monitoring, you'll be monitoring 25 jobs, year 25?
So we'll be monitoring both Bill and DOE. So it really depends on your production and your volume of where we're at. Every agency will be a little different about what numbers we'll have to meet. But we'll be monitoring this round. We'll be monitoring DOE 24 projects, and then we hope to circle back around to get the bill as well.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Do we have any additional questions? Okay, if we don't have any additional questions, then we will give you back your 6 minutes from this meeting. It was nice to speak with all of you, and look forward to our next meeting. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.